Hello and welcome back to Beyond the To-Do List, a podcast about productivity. I'm your host, Eric Fisher, and I'm excited to share with you a conversation I had with Eliana Goldstein, a career coach who focuses on helping people find their ideal roles without starting over completely, using practical tools to find clarity, build momentum, and create a work life that truly fits. In this conversation, we're talking about burnout and misalignment, how feeling drained at work isn't always about being overworked. It's often about being out of sync with your strengths. How to identify if you're even in the right industry to begin with, or if you are, but just not the right role. And a framework for evaluating whether your current role is good enough for now, or if you're ready for a pivot. We're talking about all these things and much more. So if you're ready for a career reset, or just want to feel a little bit more energized at work, this episode with Eliana Goldstein is for you. Well, it is my privilege to welcome to the show Eliana Goldstein. Eliana, welcome to Beyond the To-Do List.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here too, because we've been kind of having a string of different people offering different pivoting and looking at the career world and angles of, you know, that career, that day job, because there's a lot of volatility in that space. These days, these years even, I would say, like it feels like the last 5 to 7 years have been, you know, we've had different terms thrown out or grown up in like quiet quitting and you could probably fill in other ones. I'm not going to spend time doing that, but you've been in this space for a while. I know that this kind of came from a moment where you waved a white flag, so to speak, on your corporate career, realized you needed something different. Could you take us a little bit through that story?
Absolutely. So I worked in the corporate world for a little over a decade. I was in ad sales in the ad tech industry, and I had what you would consider a good career on paper. I felt good about it. I was making good money. I was working in the industry that I had majored in college. So I thought that I was, all set for that happy, successful, fulfilling career. And I kept finding myself in a role where I just felt very disconnected and really lacking confidence. And I just would think to myself, oh, God, this is what I'm going to do forever. Like, this doesn't feel good, right? So naturally, with my sales background, I was pretty good at landing jobs. So I would make a change, make a pivot, hoping that would be the answer. And I just kept finding myself back in the same situation until I came to a point of saying, okay, this isn't working anymore. I need to be much more intentional and strategic about the next move that I make. And I need to really think about what it is that I want to do. And that led me down a deeper path of a lot of market research and networking and self-reflection and exploration to really figure out, okay, what is it that I actually want to do in my career going forward? And through that, came into the world of coaching. Originally started it as a side hustle, like many people do with a business. And it was working well and I was really liking it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to try to do this full time. And I did. And it's been about over 5 years now, which is wild. I can't believe how quickly time flies. And now I've been doing this and I love it. And I get to support people who are kind of in that same similar situation of going, this isn't working for me anymore. I need to make a change. What should I even do in the first place? And helping them figure out what could be next.
It sounds like you got into it right as that period of time I was talking about fit in terms of timeline locked up right there for you. A lot of people would say that on paper, your career looked, successful. You were climbing the ladder, you had a good role, but you were feeling burnt out. Like, what did that burnout look like to you? Or what were those early signs that something wasn't right?
Yeah, I think when a lot of people hear burnt out, I think they automatically assume that you're overworked and, I'm doing too much. And as a result, I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I just can't keep doing this. I think for me, burnout really was more of a lack of alignment. I was doing work that I just really knew did not lean into my core skill sets. It wasn't bringing me any sense of joy. It wasn't helping me build my confidence at all. And all of that combined and just doing that over and over again led me to feel really burnt out and say, I don't have energy for this because I'm getting nothing from this in return. So I think that when you're starting to feel kind of that sense of, I have no more energy to give to this. I'm questioning myself. I'm not feeling so confident in the work that I'm doing, even though, again, on paper, this is what I thought would bring me joy. Those can actually be early signs of burnout. And it's important at those points to kind of say, okay, is this a result of being overworked, or is this a result of being kind of out of alignment with what I should be doing and what will allow me to feel more confident and kind of better lean into my core skill sets?
Well, I know that one of your core messages is that you don't have to settle for a job that's just okay. So for someone that's feeling lost or unfulfilled at work, what are some of those first questions they should be asking themselves to really kind of get a sense of self-awareness and what the next steps are?
Yeah, it's such a good question too, because I think especially in a lot of the individuals that I work with who are very ambitious and put a lot of pressure on themselves, when they feel that, they feel guilty, right? Well, again, I have this great on paper career. I shouldn't question that. Just be happy, get the paycheck, kind of move through it. But again, when you push yourself in those situations, that's what can really drive burnout. So when you start feeling those feelings, first and foremost, give yourself some acceptance and validate it. It's okay for me to have a good on paper job, but still feel like something might not be right, right? Don't try to bury it, accept it, and start looking into it. And then it comes into that idea of alignment. Start asking yourself, where am I feeling super engaged in my role, right? The tasks, the projects, the work that I'm doing on a daily, weekly basis, where do I feel super engaged? And then conversely, where do I feel disengaged in the work that I'm doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And start paying attention to some of those patterns. How often am I feeling engaged? How often am I feeling disengaged? What can I do with that, right? Is there an opportunity for me to start leaning more into the work that really truly engages me? Whether that means like self-advocating on doing more of that work and talking to my manager about it, or is there such a disconnect between what engages me and what I'm actually doing that this might not work and I might actually have to make a larger change? So that's a great place to start. I also like to always kind of explore career values, right? A lot of the time people pursue passion. Oh, I love cooking. So if I get a job that's related to food, I'm going to be super happy. But realistically, if you value creativity and you value autonomy and you value flexibility, and none of those values are showing up in your role, you're going to hate it no matter how much you love working with food, right? So think about, what are the career values that are most important to me? And do I feel like those are also showing up and being honored in the role that I'm in? So those are the places I like to start: areas of engagement, disengagement, and values.
And though some of those things may feel disconnected to people already, they often will say, people will say, well, okay, I'm going to chase after and find a role in my passion, things that I enjoy. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good at that. They may be okay. They may be moderately, they may be medium instead of high achievement in that area. So what would you say to somebody who maybe they have an inkling of what they want to be involved with? Like, it'd be somebody who's saying, I want to be involved in the music industry, but they can't sing. So then what's a career, how can they find out what that looks like in order for them to be involved in the music industry?
Yeah, no, you make such a good point, because again, what you're good at isn't necessarily what you enjoy, right? And in the ideal world, you can find the intersection of what is it that I really enjoy and that I'm good at the same time. So when it comes to something like your example with the music industry, when you're recognizing, okay, I can't sing, it goes back to that idea of, I always go back to areas of engagement and areas of disengagement. What does engage me? Am I somebody who really likes being client facing? Do I really like project management? Do I like events, right? Thinking about those core aspects. And once you're clear on that, you can figure out how and where that fits in the industry that you're targeting, right? So when it comes to the music industry, for example, there is a huge component of music that's, artist representation, and that's more client facing, or where there might be more of an opportunity to, put on events and partner with other, brands and things from that perspective, right? So you have to think about your core skills and what you're good at, but also where you have enjoyment with those skills, and then figure out, okay, where does that play in the potential industries that I'm targeting? And even more so than that, does that even fit in the industries and the roles that I'm targeting, right? Sometimes we get so dead set on, I love music, same idea, I should work in the music industry, but maybe that isn't a fit, right? Try to put your passions to the side just temporarily and really think about, what engages me? What is it that I enjoy? And I promise you, even if you think, oh, I'm only going to be happy in the music industry, if you find a place where you do work that you enjoy and that you're good at and that aligns with your values, you will actually be happy.
What about somebody who, and I'm sure you've worked with people like this, they're in the right industry already, but they might be in the wrong role. How do you help them course correct or make that lateral move that makes more sense and more a fit for them?
Yeah. And whether it's, you're in the right industry, but it's the wrong role, or sometimes you can even be in the right company, but it's the wrong role. And if anything, that's easier, right? Because it's a smaller pivot. So look, I'm all for making big changes and making big pivots, but realistically, if you can make a smaller move to start, that's always going to be easier, especially in this industry. It's a very competitive job market right now. So if you're in this place where, again, I like this industry, I like the impact that it has, I like, the mission that it's focused on, but something still feels out of alignment, we have to get to the root of that, of what is causing that lack of alignment. So again, I go back to the same thing. Where am I engaged? Where am I disengaged? Can I figure out a way to lean more into where I'm engaged and lean out of where I am disengaged? What are my core values? Are those showing up in my role? Are they not? Can I change that? Right? Even thinking about you're operating in your zone of genius, right? Kind of like, what is my superpower? Can I lean into my superpower at work? Do I have opportunities where I get into states of flow, where I can really just get so laser focused on the work that I'm doing? Is that happening in my current role? Is it not? So starting to investigate some of those things to see some of the patterns, see some of the opportunities that might be coming up. And then with that information, you can figure out, okay, want to stay in my industry, but here's what I'm noticing. In order for me to lean into these types of projects that engage me more, I can find transferable skills that lend well to this type of role, right? Or switch to this type of company instead. So you got to do the self-reflection. That's first and foremost. And then you can start doing some market research based on that self-reflection. But you got to look inward first before you do anything else.
Well, and that aligns with something you've said, which is that mindset is everything in a job search or a career change. Why do you stress that mindset is first before going to the drawing board for resumes or job boards in the search process?
Yeah. And this goes back to even before I was talking about the job market is very competitive right now, right? There's a lot of really highly qualified people looking for roles when there are just less roles available. So no matter what, no matter how productive you are, how smart you are, how qualified you are, there will be temporary setbacks where you don't get the role that you wanted, or the networking contact you wanted to speak to blew you off, whatever it is, it's going to happen. It doesn't matter. It's going to happen. When you have a strong mindset, you can build that sense of resilience. And to be productive, to be successful in this job market, looking for any job, you need to be resilient. You need to be able to move through the ups and the downs. And rather than getting caught up in the rejection that happens and trying to figure out why and, letting yourself spiral, you have to say, okay, that didn't work out. Here's what I'm going to take and learn from that. On to the next one. And you only can do that when you feel confident in yourself and you feel secure and level-headed. So mindset as the foundation is always key.
And that ties in again with when we're in this job search process, there's so many thoughts and self-doubts and creeping fears and feelings that come in, and you talk about those and separating those from or the facts of a thing from the story of a thing and rewriting that narrative. Talk a little bit about how that internal narrative drives us.
I love that you did your research. I appreciate this so much. So in our career, we all have experiences that happen to us, right? For example, we get laid off, and it's almost impossible right now to speak to somebody who hasn't experienced a layoff. But that layoff, which is a fact, you were laid off from a role, we internalize it and then we reinterpret it in a way that's very negative for us. We create a story around it. So rather than just saying to myself, I was in an unfortunate situation, I was laid off with many people, we create a story of, I don't have the skill sets, my manager never liked me, I was always terrible at the projects I did, and as a result of that, I was laid off from the role, right? All those things that you say prior to the facts of I was laid off, none of that might be true. But because we have these moments of self-doubt, because a lot of us lack confidence, we create a negative story and negative narrative around it. And then we live in that narrative. And then we're trying to job search while telling ourselves the story of, I get laid off from my roles because my managers never like me and because I'm not good at the work that I do. It's going to be really hard to land a new job and be able to show up with confidence and putting your best foot forward if you are constantly telling yourself that story. So you have to be able to separate between what are the facts of the situation that happened, I was laid off, versus a story you're telling yourself around that of, I suck, I'm not good at what I do, my managers always hate me, and really live in the facts rather than the story.
Well, and one of the facts of it may be for somebody that, and again, it may be fortunate enough to still be in a position and feel that kind of self-awareness coming, like we were talking about earlier, where they sense that the role or the industry or the position or whatever, the tasks, even as minute as just some of these tasks aren't really in alignment for me. But then there's that advice they hear where they're like, be thankful because you should not quit your job without another one lined up. What's your take on that in terms of, how do you help clients balance taking a risk and having intentional change versus some of the security that they still maintain?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I will say that I'm risk averse, and I definitely don't encourage a client to just quit on a whim with nothing else lined up. I think we have to still be smart. Again, it's a different job market. You don't know exactly how long your search is going to take. So it's important to still be strategic and intentional. When you get to that point of feeling like, there's no alignment here, I'm doing tasks that not only do I not enjoy, but that I'm not particularly good at. Again, notice that, sit with that, and recognize before you try to kind of like fit a square peg in a round hole, or whatever the expression is, and trying to make it happen, realize that it's probably not going to change. If you advocated, had conversations with your manager, the situation where you are is not changing, make a definitive decision that I need to find something new. And then what you need to do, and this is what's hard, is you never want to put yourself in a situation where you could get fired or laid off because you're completely slacking and not doing your job. But you need to be able to kind of do what's needed of you, but put the rest of your energy into a job search. And I think, again, and this I'm speaking a lot to the clients that I work with who tend to be overachieving and very ambitious, they still feel like even though I hate this job and I want to leave, I need to put my best foot forward, even though I have no intentions of growing there. So you have to be able to take a step back, again, say, okay, I'm not saying that I'm abandoning my job and I'm not doing it anymore, but I don't need to go above and beyond if I'm not trying to grow and I'm not trying to get promoted. So I can put some of that energy into figuring out what the next thing is, and start getting intentional, be strategic and thoughtful about how you job search, what steps you're taking so that you can make progress and focus on the right things. But again, not put yourself in a position that you're just quitting with nothing lined up. I mean, sure, some people get to a place where from a mental headspace, they physically cannot be in their job anymore. And I understand that and respect that. But you need to make sure, what's your financial runway? How much time do you have before you need to have another job? Again, there needs to be some thoughtfulness and strategy that goes into making any of those types of decisions.
Well, and you'd say that we should be looking at our positions with kind of a 70-30 rule that, not every job is 100% perfect. So how can we tell if that current position is good enough for now? Of course, change always happens. It's inevitable. Or if it's time to move on.
Yeah. So I think that one of the best ways, like the 70-30 rule you refer to, is we ideally want 70% about of the work that we're doing to be some work that engages us versus 30% of the work not going to engage us as much, right? And I share that because the whole notion of a dream job where you're going to be happy at every single moment of every day is a complete farce. And when we set that as our expectation, we're never going to be happy, right? Because no matter what you do, there's going to be aspects of your role that you don't enjoy. So around the 70-30 rule, I think helps sets realistic expectations. One of the best things to do is to just start, if you can't do it daily, on a weekly basis, reflect on the work that you've been doing throughout the week and ask yourself, was this engaging or was this not engaging? And start noticing how much of the work does truly engage me and how much of it disengages me, right? Am I noticing like 10% of the time I'm engaged and 90% I'm not? That might be something that's hard to come back from. Or maybe you notice it's 50-50, right? But once you are aware of, okay, this is what engages me and this is what disengages me, you can then have the conversation with the appropriate person, whether that's your manager or, leadership around your team. Hey, this is what I really enjoy and this is where I truly feel I can bring the most value. Is there an opportunity for me to lean into more of that work and bring like concrete examples of that work, which is why it's so important to reflect and write that down. See if there's an opportunity to change that. And if you're noticing like, doesn't seem like this is going to change, or I'm so far off between where I'm engaged and disengaged that there's no coming back from this, then you can make that thoughtful decision of, okay, it's time for me to start considering and looking for something new.
Yeah. And if they've got that feeling that it's not 70-30, I don't know what it is, but the ratio feels like, I don't know, 30-70 the other way, or 50-50 or something like that. And they just feel kind of like they're running on fumes, and they know, okay, my first choice, you're suggesting first choice, take a look and see if it's possible to shift that ratio at least some, so that you can get some of your energy back, as well as stay a little longer and find out what the truth is in the situation. Find a little bit of a difference maybe in the position of itself, or find a little bit more clarity in your own mindset before then going along and saying, okay, I've got to jump ship.
Exactly. It's always going to be easier to make changes. Generally, it's always going to be easier to make changes within your own role before looking for a new role. And I say everything in the context of the 2025 job market, which is a more competitive job market. So before you jump ship entirely, can I make changes here, right? And you can only do that once you're reflecting properly. And I love that you asked that question around what is something you could do. Write it down. Let me look through my week. What was good? What wasn't good? Can I fix this based on this? A lot of the times people make decisions with zero information to back up that decision. So you got to really think through what you're doing and what you're enjoying and what you're not. See if you can change it from there. And if you realize this isn't going to happen, I can't change it, at that point, you can make the intentional decision to start targeting and looking for something new.
And I know that you've got a framework essentially called something along the lines of uncover, align, build, and close. Walk us through that those are plain English words, but speak to us like we don't know what those mean.
Yeah. And I feel like also in light of this podcast and focus on productivity, I am all for a framework, right? And I think when it comes to job searching, people think that as long as they're busy, they're being productive. And that's just not true. If you're not, again, being intentional and strategic, it doesn't matter how busy you are, that is not productive. So we like to break it into a 4-part process. Some of those parts we've already been talking about, right? So uncover is really all around your mindset. What are the stories, the mindset blocks that are holding you back, that are potentially really hurting your confidence, and is going to make the overall job search much harder for you, or the career change process much harder for you? Part 2, align, goes into that clarity work around where am I engaged and disengaged? What are my values? Where am I operating in my zone in genius, right? How can I pull out and extract the right information about myself and about what do I enjoy, what my opportunities are, to ultimately uncover transferable skills and align on better fitting opportunities moving forward? And then once you have that mindset work down, once you feel clarity and clear on how you want to move forward, you move into part 3, build, which is where we start entering more strategic parts of the process. This is all, of course, getting your resume and your LinkedIn in order to reflect that direction you are targeting, leaning very heavily into networking and relationship building, because that is always going to be far more effective than just sending out 50 applications a day. And then we close in on the offer through strategic interview strategy, which is delivering that elevator pitch, structuring the answers to interview questions, the questions you need to be asking, all those various components. So that's how we break it up into a clear 4-step process.
Great. A lot of listeners, they're probably finding themselves mid-pivot. They're in that researching and networking area. They're unsure of what's next. For those people, what are a few small, low pressure actions, because we already have so much pressure on us, that they could take now to feel like they've got some additional forward momentum?
Yep. So depending on where you are in the process, if you're thinking about making a pivot and you have a couple ideas lined up already, I find that something people get very fearful about is choosing the wrong thing, right? Oh, I've already been in this job for so long. I hate it. What if I make another mistake? And unfortunately, none of us have the opportunity to just test out a bunch of different jobs, right? Oh, I'm going to go be a project manager one day and then an account executive the next day. We can't do that. So one of the best things that I like to do from a market research perspective is market research in the form of networking. How can I target and find, call it 3 or 4 people who are in the roles that I'm thinking about for myself, to set up some type of informational meeting just to kind of vet and check, does this really feel aligned? To be able to talk to someone again in the role that I'm thinking about for myself and be able to say, yeah, walk me through what a typical day looks like for you. What is it that you enjoy about your role? And what is it that you don't enjoy? How much do you get to do this type of work, right? What are things that you don't like about your role? And really being able to have those proper conversations to check, okay, is this what I'm kind of cracking it up to be? Will this allow me to lean into the skills that I've discovered about myself or the skills that I want to carry forward? And I think that can give you a lot of confidence in making those types of decisions. And I think it's important because often, again, when we think about networking, we think about it purely for the referral. I want this role, help refer me in for this job. And absolutely, that's a part of it. But I also want people to think about networking from the perspective of market research. I'm still making a decision. Let me just have some informational conversations with people so I can gut check this a little bit further before I dive deep into actually targeting and pursuing these roles.
Well, and you've said that every major career change you've made was because of your network. And I think for me, I would say that's exactly the same. Completely true for myself as well. And networking is a big part of your strategy, but I would say it intimidates a lot of people. How can we tap into that community approach and not just make it transactional, but make it more approachable and effective?
Yeah, I think networking gets a really bad rap. A lot of people think of it as like the sleazy car salesman, right? Oh, I'm going to go up to this person and I'm going to be like, oh, get me a job. And of course, they're not going to respond well, right? Exactly as you said, it feels super transactional. So I think that seeing networking is more of a value exchange, right? Networking is not going up to somebody and asking for a job. If that is how you're thinking about it and doing it, that's not the right thing. It really is about learning about another person, sitting down and having a conversation, just saying, yeah, I want to learn a little bit about the work that you do. I want to learn a little bit about what you love. I want to learn a little bit about how you got to where you are. Like good networking is actually a little bit of flattery, complimenting the other person, right? Making them feel good about themselves, not just taking from them. So see it as a way to give to another person, to learn from them, to again, make them feel good about themselves and everything they've accomplished in their career. And just by doing that, it allows you to form more of a natural relationship. And it also allows you to, again, see it as I'm not just asking them for a favor, I'm genuinely building a relationship. So part of it is, and like if the word networking as a whole freaks you out, just call it relationship building, right? I'm just going to meet some new people. I'm just going to ask them some questions. I'm going to learn from them. I'm going to make them feel good about myself. And I'm not going to come in with an ask. That can come later on. But for now, I'm just building a relationship with somebody. And if that is still really intimidating, think about two, like I always think about networking in kind of two buckets, low-hanging fruit and high-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit are the people you're already directly connected with. This is a family member or a friend of a friend, people that are easy to reach out to, versus high-hanging fruit might be someone that you don't really have any real connection to. And I understand why that can be intimidating. I think it's important to still have those conversations, but it can be more intimidating. But just start with your immediate network. And think about it as, again, I'm not reaching out to, my cousin's friend to ask them for a job. I'm reaching out purely to learn from them, to ask them some questions, to make them feel good about themselves and approach it from that angle as, again, opposed to I need something from them. They have to help me get a job.
Well, and you're working with people that have been working through this process probably at various stages. You're helping them make these big career shifts, often through small, consistent over time steps, which honestly requires a lot of productivity and structure and systems. How does that word productivity feel to you now, especially when you've kind of left that hustle culture behind?
Yeah, I think this is why I think it's so important in the context of a job search, because as I said before, an effective job search, especially in this market, is all about being really productive. And so often, if I even said to you, Eric, how do you look for a job? Most people say, I update my resume. I set a goal to apply to 50 jobs a week or even a day, right? And I just try to get it out there and do as much as possible. And people feel like they're doing something because, again, they're being busy. But I can promise you that is not going to work. And that is not intentional. That is not productive, right? So when you think about it and approach it, you have to first get really clear on a strategy and set out for yourself, okay, here are the steps that I want to follow. And how do I make sure that at every point I'm being as productive as possible? So some of the things that I like to do and instruct my clients to do is at the start of every single week, you want to map out 2 to 3 main goals for yourself, right? Don't overwhelm yourself. Do not give yourself 10 different goals you need to accomplish, 2 to 3 goals. So that might be like, I want to have 3 or 4 networking conversations, or I want to update my resume, or I'm making all this up. I want to work on my interview techniques, right? 3 reasonable goals that you want to focus on for that week. Look at your calendar for the upcoming week. Put time blocks in your calendar. Here's an hour and a half period I have. Here's a 45-minute period I have. Like, put those in your calendar, block them off. And then for every single one of those time blocks, like, dedicate a specific activity to it. That time block is strictly going to be for networking. This time block is strictly going to be for interview prep, right? Get really intentional and focus in that time block versus, again, most people try to do 6 different things in a 1-hour block, and then you're not getting anything done. So that's how I look. I'm not like by any means some like big productivity star of here's all the Uber hacks you need to do. It's just like small shifts so that you can be really intentional with your time is going to be the best way to be productive on your job search.
And it sounds like that's a really good prescription for what I've seen a lot of people in a job search mode have as far as a place they get stuck. It's this analysis paralysis. I've got all these different options, not only positions, job boards I could go to, people I can reach out to. I've got all these different things. Which one? Yeah. I don't know what's the right one to do? What's the right next thing to do? And it's like, hold on, slow down, pause.
Yep.
And, deal a little bit with the overwhelm with maybe some self-care, but then go into what you were just talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I go to what are the 2 to 3 main goals, right? You're not going to accomplish 10 goals in a week. What are the 2 to 3 main goals? And you can even ask yourself, okay, what are the goals that I feel like will move the needle the most for me at this point in time, right? Is sending 50 applications actually going to move the needle for me? Or is having 3 or 4 really intentional conversations going to move the needle for me more? So get clear on what do I feel will move the needle for me, structure 2 to 3 goals around that, and then time block based on those 2 to 3 goals. There'll be another week you can focus on other things, but the more you can get laser focused in certain periods of time, the more you will move the needle ultimately.
And being able to check those things, if you are like me, checking those things off after having done them can be a dopamine hit, an ounce or a push forward in terms of motivation and momentum. What are some other ways to maybe not just maintain, but kickstart some momentum, some motivation to keep going, especially if you've been in the search mode for a while?
So one of the things that I talk about a lot is celebrating your micro wins. So there's no better way to feel momentum and feel good about yourself than doing something that makes you feel proud, right? And I think in the job search specifically, we get so focused on the end goal of landing the job. And obviously, yeah, that's the big goal, but that's what takes a lot of the work, right? That we forget about all the small wins along the way. So for example, you had one networking conversation, celebrate that as a win. That was great. I did that. Or I spent 30 minutes doing some mock interview prep. That is a win. Celebrate that win. When you focus on all the small intentional wins that you have throughout the process, it helps carry through that motivation into the next win and helps you want to keep going. If the only win for you is going to be when you get a job, you're not going to feel good throughout the process because that goal is further away, right? And then everything you do in between to get there doesn't feel like anything significant, right? So micro wins, celebrating those micro wins throughout the entire process is super important for building that momentum.
And you've been working with people so many years now, even though it's been 5+ years, something like that. You've been able to help them celebrate those wins. I would love to point people to where they can go to connect with you, learn more about your coaching, get started on building, a career that they're more excited about than the one they're in now, or honestly, move towards a position that they maybe have been looking for a while.
Yeah, 100%. So best way to connect with me on social media, on LinkedIn, it's just my name, Eliana Goldstein. Same thing on Instagram, Eliana_Goldstein, or even my website, which is, we keep it simple, ElianaGoldsteinCoaching.com, all about simplicity. So I love connecting with people in real time and hearing from them what they're working through or struggling with. So, feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Eliana, it's been great. You've really got me motivated in some ways, and I hope that others listening have as well. Thank you for sharing your insight, your expertise, and your skills that we can learn how to do this career shift. Thank you so much.
Of course. No, thank you so much. It was really fun to chat all about this with you.
Well, that's another podcast crossed off your listening to-do list. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Eliana Goldstein as much as I did, and I hope that you're walking away with some clarity, whether it's that you're in the right place but just not the right seat, or if you need to jump the bus completely and get on a new one, and how to do that. Again, make sure to connect with Eliana. I've put her links in the show notes for this episode. You can find them at beyondthetodolist.com or wherever you're listening to this in your podcast player app of choice. That's also where you can do me the favor of sharing this episode with somebody that you know needs to hear it. Think of that person, think of that thing that you learned that really stuck with you. Send it on over to them. Let them know what you learned and how it can help them. Thank you so much for sharing. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next episode.